Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. So our presentation today is both myself and my partner, Shubhash, Gosine. We're going to speak about a natural perspective on universal basic income. So, as actuaries, we do possess a lot of unique skills where we could contribute a lot in this field. And we hope by the end of this presentation, we do get some good feedback from you. So I'll hand over to Shubhash to go first.
Hello, everyone. I'm using the technology bridge to get to you in Australia. It's actually afternoon for you on Monday, and it's Sunday night for me in Jamaica. I'll start. So in looking at UBI, we identified three definitions: one from the IMF, one in Australia, and then Barbados. UBI income support mechanism typically intended to reach all of the population. A payment made to all adults that allows people to meet their basic needs. Then the regional one in the Caribbean, the latest definition was a government program in which every adult citizen receives a set amount of money regularly. The goals of any basic income system are to alleviate poverty and replace other need-based social programs that potentially require greater bureaucratic involvement. Pedro and I, however, came up with our own definition, a national program in which every adult citizen domiciled in a country receives a predetermined amount of money on a regular basis. The main goal of the UBI system being to alleviate abject poverty. Some historical examples: the UBI came up in the UK in 1920, however, it was rejected. Then USA and Canada toyed with it between 1968 and 1982. Heather Ross proposed the New Jersey income maintenance experiment in 1967, and 137 families were covered. Rural Iowa and North Carolina did the same for 809 families. Gary, Indiana for 4,800 families. Seattle and Denver, 4,800 families. And then Manitoba, Canada did one in 74 to 79 for 10,000 persons. Alaska since 1982 used their oil well to create a permanent fund, which provided a partial basic income to all permanent residents. However, in the US, Andrew Yang brought up UBI in the run-up to the US elections in 2020. However, COVID-19, the 2 years the world was challenged, economically, health-wise, and so on, UBI came to the front burner in many countries. Spain, different parts of Europe, different parts of, the world. And the need for financial security for these challenged parts of society became even more important for us to look at. So today, in Europe, UBI, the European Citizens Initiative, they are promoting UBI for every European country and trying to extend that to the world. Since 2017, Kenya has had a UBI pilot program, and that seems to be going well, except in the last year, Kenya has had some serious economic challenges. So I have not been able to get any further update on that, but I understand the program is still being conducted. China has done quite a few pilots, which was successful, but they see that to roll it out to the wider population is economically unfeasible. India also had some pilot programs in Madhya Pradesh. They were successful, but of course, being such a large country, they have a lot of debates, and so it hasn't gone any further. The IMF, however, has a working paper on India, and the authors of that paper has demonstrated that UBI is more efficient and provides better coverage than the current system, which is very inefficient and allows for a significant amount of corruption. There are different approaches to UBI, some of which flat amount, where every citizen receives this amount regardless of his status. Means tested, where the UBI received is adjusted based on the individual's income and other factors. And then one called negative income tax, where it's a UBI-like system implemented through the tax system with low-income individuals receiving money back from the government instead of paying taxes. Support for UBI. Those in favor of UBI look at it from the perspective of poverty reduction, provides an economic stimulus as that money circulates back into the economy. And then it helps to simplify the welfare system because, as we all know, most if not all societies have some form of a welfare system. Those against, or who argue against, is because they think the cost is prohibitive, and funding is difficult, especially from current taxation. It doesn't incentivize people to work, it discourages them and creates a culture of dependency. It's unfair for those who have to support those who don't have. There are inflationary risks on a macro scale, and it could lead, if uncontrolled, it will lead to poor spending habits in that the people who receive it would spend it on, let's say, cigarettes and alcohol. Right, so Pedro is gonna run a quick poll.
Yep. So to run this a bit more efficient, what we can do is during the Q&A session, if some of you could come forward and give some of your opinions on UBI schemes, whether you're for them or against, and why. So.
Right. Okay. So now I'm going to our area of focus, which is the Caribbean. The Caribbean is a lot of countries, but small. The largest, well, not counting Cuba and Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic and Haiti. The rest of the population, Jamaica has just 3 million, and everybody else is between 100 to 100,000 persons to the 3 million. A lot of our young population that can't find jobs, they migrate to North America. So we have an aging population. We have a brain drain. And in the Caribbean, we're highly exposed to climate change in that we have a hurricane season where we have maybe 5 or 6 storms and maybe 1 or 2 hurricanes, and that has become a regular pattern now, almost every year. Almost every country has large trade deficits and are under IMF assistance and programs. The new jewel in the crown is Guyana, as most of you may know that their newfound wealth is they have some of the largest oil finds in recent times. We have a high debt to GDP ratios, but as I said, the IMF is helping a lot of countries bring that under control. For example, while Jamaica was over 100% a few years ago, I think it's probably around 85% now. As we are small islands and beaches, we rely heavily on tourism. As I mentioned before, the size, population-wise, geographical, even the industry, we can't compete with exporting, food production because, farms in the US and other countries are probably as large as the entire Caribbean islands added together. And then technology, we tend to follow the developed countries, and so there's quite a lot of employment. For matter of fact, most of our youngsters who get involved in technology move to North America to work. That is changing slowly as a lot of people work remotely, but we still are far behind. Continuing, so our welfare systems face many challenges. The biggest one is cost. Then delivery. Delivery is very, very inefficient and suspect corruption, as you may read in newspapers if you follow the Caribbean. Then there's the political will where they focus on what the party in power focuses on what they consider primary, as opposed to what benefits the country totally. And then there's always administrative issues. There's a high concentration of economic vulnerabilities. So for Jamaica, for instance, because of COVID, I think those that have been recognized as below the poverty line is about 22%, and whereas pre-COVID it was like about maybe 15 or 16%. Then, as I mentioned before, we have the hurricanes. Some of the islands have earthquakes. Some of the islands have volcanoes, and then the governments tend to budget, spend more than they can allocate, and so they end up having funding through the IMF, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the Caribbean Development Bank. China's Belt and Road Initiative. All Caribbean islands have benefited from this in some form or the other.
Sorry, Shubhash, just conscious of time here as well. We've got the 3-minute warning for this presentation.
Sure, I just have 2 more slides, I believe. Oh, that's for the whole presentation?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, all right. So let's just deal with Barbados, and then Pedro will take over. We're looking at Barbados. Population is just under 300,000. Life expectancy is 75, 80. Literacy is 100%. And GDP growth for 2023 is expected to be between 4 and 5%. All right, Pedro, yours.
Okay, so thank you, Shubhash, for that brief background to set the context for today. One thing I wanted to touch on, he mentioned, was the 100% literacy rate in Barbados, which will come up in our very, very quick presentation. So this actually is a precursor for a full academic paper that we're working on, and it is a passion project for us. And, for us, we do have full-time jobs, and this does require a lot of full-time research, a lot of government engagement, and availability of good data. And the reason we decided to use Barbados, not because I'm from there, but it's a very small country. We do have lots of welfare systems in place, but they are very inefficient because you're targeting the same groups of people, but spread over different ministries. So it actually is a very good case from there. And as we looked in the literature, we're looking at examples across the world. And one of the very good examples we did see was in India with an IMF working program. With the interest of time, I'll skip over that quickly. So we'll touch quickly on our data collection. So most of the information we did use was publicly available. So information from the central bank, our statistical service, and we would build our model from scratch. We programmed it in Java, but in hindsight, we might change that over to R, just based on the statistical packages that are available that make our life a lot easier. So standard census and inflation rates. I did have a comment there regarding implied net migration, and that is a data element that isn't readily available. But how we were able to proxy for that was what wasn't explained by births or deaths had to be net migration. All right. So just as good actuary, some assumptions and limitations. Salary information is very hard to obtain, and it kind of limited the ability for us to do a lot of means testing in terms of that type of approach. So we looked more at the flat income approach for our research thus far. And again, part of that is that we have a large informal sector. So there's a person who will be, selling, not part of the formal system. So entrepreneurs who might be have different craft projects, agricultural projects. So there's not a lot of data readily available for those persons, but those are persons that we need to take in consideration. As we saw during the COVID pandemic, in terms of providing a safety net for those persons, it was very difficult not having information available for them. We had very good data for those within the working population, but as we got beyond those years, what we did do for information that wasn't readily available, we did make some assumptions to proxy for those data. And during this iteration of research, we did skip over to stochastic modeling for a lot of those economic assumptions, just to do a simple approach for now for this year's Congress. I skip over the valuation model. We're all actuaries, but just to give you a general synopsis, if you think about UBI, you're paying a person, let's say $1 for the rest of their lifetime. So that is a simple annuity product, which we would have used to build the model. In terms of our new business model, which are persons who are born, who are not yet there, and net migration, we have made some adjustments in our model to accommodate for those persons. So in our base model run, we kind of just looked at if you were to give a basic amount, and this $1,200 annually is kind of close to the tax credit that citizens who earn less than the equivalent of $12,500 US a year do receive. So we looked at what it would cost our government to provide to all citizens. We also used this base rent to do some testing. So we started from 2010, we did our projection of population to make sure it kind of come in line with the current census. And also look at the current costs. And you can see we will do some comparisons to the current expenditure that the government of Barbados makes on SVD and on welfare, sorry. And we did a special test scenario on free tertiary education. And the reason we did this is that one key critical thing that the government of Barbados did when Barbados first became an independent country in 1966 was to implement free education. That's both at the primary, secondary level, and tertiary education. So I was able to attend university free, all right? I think for some of you in European countries, it might be a concept you're familiar with. For those who live in the US and Canada, not so much. And we actually use the current cost. It's not very expensive of what it would cost if you were to provide this free education to all of these citizens. So we just decided, for simplicity, to focus on young adults between the age of 18 and 23 and run projections through our model. So in the first test scenario that we used in terms of tertiary education, we thought this was good because it is a benefit that already existed, right? So we do have good data in terms of what our government is currently spending. For all the other welfare programs, they're very ad hoc. It depends on the current government that is in place. It's very inefficient. So in terms of good data, that wasn't available. But this was a good case scenario for us to use. And during, in the year 2018, which is a very special year for Barbados, a decision was made to reverse a temporary decision made in 2014 to actually cancel free tertiary education. And this caused a big uproar in the country, saying that we got accustomed to it. It was a key pillar for the country. And it was estimated to save the country around $42 million every year. We thought that amount was overestimated. As you can see, in the academic year 2021 to 2022, the government only spent around $50 million. So I'm not sure where the $42 million in savings was going to come from. And the reason that by canceling this as well, we saw a huge fallout in tertiary enrollment. Is a key pillar to the development of the country. When you look at the region, Barbados is actually a very developed country within the Caribbean and is doing very, very well. And that's due to the education in terms of the poverty levels. when you compare it to other countries in the Caribbean, you can see the benefits of education and free education. So to test our model, we kind of looked at the projected costs that were currently there. We've done this in 2021, 2022, but when we forecast and compare it to the current expenditures that the government have estimated, they're actually pretty much in line, which gives us a good indication in terms of our inflation targets and everything. It was kind of working well. One scenario, though, that is not being checked by our government, one, is that they assume that the current level of uptake kind of remains the same. So there's no stress testing that's being done. And one of the things that was very short-sighted was that because there was no future projections, no involvement of anyone really doing much planning, it then gives the government, any change in government to come in and say, okay, well, fine, here's the easy way for me to save X amount to my budget.
Sorry, Pedro, I'm going to have to wrap up in a sec.
Okay, all right, so I'll just skip quickly ahead. I'm trying to find a way to summarize this quickly. So one of the outcomes that we do have from this project, and using our case scenario, is that we see that there could be a case, it could be modeled, there could be planning. It would be good if the government could allow some actuaries to be involved. So we hope by doing this paper and putting forward this business case, there will be the engagement there. And it, for me, is a passion because it gives us the ability to kind of address some of the efficient systems that exist, where you have people might go to a welfare place to get support for the family, welfare place to get support for unemployment. A lot of persons repeating the same things. And the other thing is that because money is being spent, it means that money is there. So whether it's affordable or not, I mean, could be debated. But our thing is that this money could be used a lot more efficiently, be monitored a lot more efficiently, and improve year upon year. And with good planning and projections, then you could create a more sustainable UBI system. Yeah.
Thank you.